The sea had a way of making kingdoms feel small. Daenerys Targaryen tasted salt on the wind and smoke beneath it, as if the world itself had begun to burn before she arrived. Ahead, King's Landing lay like a bruise on the shore. Dark walls, crooked towers, the black lump of Aegon's high hill thrusting up behind it. Even from miles away she could see the thin orange stitches of fire along the battlements, and the harsher, greener glow on the river where men were already dying. The Blackwater. She had heard the name in Karth, spoken like a warning. She had heard it again in Volantis, where the priests of the Red God had whispered it like prophecy. A river that would run with flame, a city that would choke on its own lies. Behind her, the fleet creaked and moaned in the swell, Volantine galleys with tiger prows, 2 Myrish Dromons, a squat Carthene trader repainted in soot-black, their decks crowded with hard-eyed sailors and zealots who had traded coin for a glimpse of her dragons. 10 of them. Even now, the sound of their wings made the rigging tremble. They were not birds. They were weather. Drogon passed overhead, vast enough that the moonlight did not fully cross his back. His scales drank the light like ink. When he folded his wings, the air thickened. When he stretched them, the wind changed direction, and the fleet answered as if tugged by a giant's hand. He was growing too fast, faster than nature, faster than any maester's careful lies about the world. The priests called it blessing. Jorah called it sorcery. Daenerys called it necessity. The 3 high priests on her deck stood in a half-circle around a bronze brazier, their red robes snapping like banners. The oldest, Benero of Volantis, held his hands over the coals and murmured in a language older than Valyria, his voice steady as a drum. Beside him, a woman with a face marked by old burns, High Priestess Ysilla, sprinkled powdered black stone into the fire. The third, a tall man with copper rings through his ears, lifted a thin knife and drew a line across his palm, letting blood hiss into the flame. Fire answered blood. Always, Daenerys watched without flinching. She had flinched once, when she was a girl in Pentos and Viserys had raised his hand. She had flinched again when Drogo had died. After that, the world had taken all her flinching away and left her with something harder. "What do you see?" she asked. Benero did not look up. His eyes reflected the coals like twin suns. "A city that has forgotten fear," he said, and the words came out in the common tongue as if the flames themselves translated. "And a queen who will teach it again." Jorah shifted, armor rasping. "And what of the people in it?" Daenerys did not answer at once. She felt the weight of their gazes, Jorah's caution, the priest's hunger, the sailor's awe. Above them, the 9 smaller dragons wheeled and shrieked, their calls sharp as knives. They had names, all of them. Names she had given in the first trembling weeks after the pyre, when 10 hot little hearts beat against her palms and she had laughed and cried at once because she had thought herself empty and found she was full of fire. Rhaegal and Viserion still flew close to Drogon like bright green and pale gold shadows. But the others, Nymeria's fire, Stormborn's kiss, Blackfire, Sky Reaver, Ashwing, Red Comet, Sunchaser, had begun to hunt farther, testing their strength, tasting the world. They were hers, and they were not. "The people have a king," Daenerys said at last. "Let him save them." Jorah looked as though he wanted to argue, but the river ahead erupted in an ugly green bloom, and the wind carried a distant roar that was half triumph, half agony. The battle had begun without her, as battles always did. Men deciding the world belonged to them until the world reminded them otherwise. Daenerys tightened her hands around the rail. The wood was damp, slick with spray. She could feel Drogon's mind like a storm behind her eyes. Restless, eager, hungry for heat that no sea could quench. "Ready the ropes," she said. "Loose the dragons." The sailors froze, suddenly remembering they were mortal. Benero's smile was thin as a blade. "Tonight," he murmured, "the false lions learn what it is to be prey." The first time Daenerys saw wildfire burn, she understood the men of Westeros in a single breath. They had found a way to make green flame, unnatural, hungry, clinging, and they had used it on each other with the devotion of children setting ants alight. The Blackwater was a mirror shattered by fire. Ships slammed into ships. Oars splintered. Men screamed until their throats were raw and the smoke stole the rest. Stannis Baratheon's fleet pressed forward anyway, as relentless as the man himself, their prows biting the burning river as if stubbornness could drown flame. Drogon's shadow swallowed an entire section of the bay. Daenerys leaned into his neck, fingers gripping the ridge of scales that rose like a mountain beneath her. The heat of him seeped through her gloves. His breath tasted of iron and ash, as if he had already chewed the city and found it wanting. Below, she glimpsed the crowned stag banners and the plain black sails. She saw men raising shields toward a sky that did not care. She saw one ship, high-sided, packed with soldiers, hit a patch of wildfire and vanish in a single furious bloom, leaving only a ring of green fire licking the water like a tongue. Her 9 other dragons followed, smaller than Drogon but monstrous by any sane measure. They moved like wolves in the air, one high, one low, 2 sweeping wide to flank. The priests had taught her to think of them as a pack, not a clutch. Pack hunted, pack killed clean. Not the men, Daenerys told Drogon, and it felt strange to speak restraint when the whole world below begged for annihilation. The weapons, the ships, break the teeth. Spare the mouths if you can. Drogon's mind pushed back. A hot, offended surge. Fire did not spare. Fire consumed. Daenerys pressed her forehead to his scales. "I am your mother," she whispered, "and your queen." He roared, and the sound rolled over the bay like thunder. Men on both sides flinched. Some fell to their knees on wet decks, hands raised, praying to 7 gods that had never answered them. A few simply stared, mouths open, as if their minds could not hold the shape of what they saw. The first dragonfire was not green. It was black-orange, so bright it bleached the world for an instant. Drogon opened his jaws, and a river of flame poured down, not at the crowded decks but at the tangled forest of masts and sails. Canvas ignited. Rigging snapped and whipped like lashes. The ship's soldiers screamed anyway, because fire did not ask permission when it found a body. 2 of the smaller dragons swooped in after, Ashwing and Red Comet, raking the waterline with flame, forcing ships apart. Another, Skyreaver, dropped low enough that men could see the pale scars along its belly where the priests had branded runes with heated iron, whispering prayers as the dragon thrashed and shrieked. The marks glowed faintly in the heat, ugly as wounds and just as permanent. On one of Stannis' ships, a man with a rough, honest face, Ser Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, stood at the bow and stared upward, his eyes wet with smoke. He did not pray. He did not run. He simply watched, as if he could will the sky to make sense. Daenerys saw him, and for a heartbeat she wondered what it would be to have a man like that at her side. One who had chosen duty without loving the chains it came with. Then wildfire exploded again, closer this time, and Drogon jerked, wings buffeting the air. Green flame rose toward him like grasping hands. He snapped at it, furious, and his own fire met it in midair. The collision was violent, 2 kinds of hunger fighting for the same breath. The air cracked, the smoke turned thick and oily. Below, men were knocked off decks by the shockwave and vanished into burning water. "What have they done?" Daenerys breathed. Yora's voice crackled from a rope ladder below where he clung to the mast of her flagship, watching her as if he could keep her safe by sheer stubbornness. "Wildfire," he shouted. "The alchemists' pyromancers. I told you King's Landing was mad." Mad, yes, and afraid. Fear made men invent green fire. Daenerys lifted her chin toward the city. The walls loomed closer, and she could see archers assembling on the battlements, their bows looking suddenly foolish beneath a sky full of dragons. Somewhere in that stone hive, a boy sat on a throne and called himself king. Somewhere, a woman with lion's eyes clenched her hands and decided what sacrifices were acceptable. Daenerys did not need to meet them to know them. She had lived with such people all her life. "Drogon," she said, and the name was a promise. "To the Red Keep." The city answered her approach with arrows. They rose in a black swarm, 100 shafts at once. Feathered death meant for men on horses, for sellswords on foot, for anything that had the decency to stay on the ground. Drogon did not have that decency. The arrows struck his scales and skittered away like rain on slate. One found a softer seam near his wing joint, and he bellowed, the sound shaking loose dust from the battlements. His wings beat once, twice, each beat a slap to the world, and the arrow storm scattered. Daenerys saw the men on the wall recoil. She saw their fear become something else. Rage, denial, a desperate hope that numbers could conquer wonder. The first wave of arrows did not kill her, so they sent another. Enough, she said softly. Drogon opened his mouth. Flame washed over the battlement like a tide. Stone blackened, then glowed, then cracked. Men screamed as heat turned their armor into ovens. Some leapt from the wall rather than burn where they stood. Others tried to run and found there was nowhere to run on a wall that had become a skillet. Below, Stannis' soldiers surged, howling, taking advantage of the sudden collapse. Ladders went up in a frenzy. Grappling hooks bit into stone. The river gate shuddered under a ram. For a moment, it looked like the battle might become what it was meant to be. A contest of men, brutal and simple. Then Drogon's shadow slid across the mud, and the men looked up again. Daenerys saw Tyrion Lannister before she knew his name. He was small among the others, but the smallness did not diminish him. It sharpened him. He stood on the wall in black armor trimmed in scarlet, a helm under one arm. His mismatched eyes narrowed against the smoke. He was not gawking like a peasant. He was measuring. He was thinking even as death moved around him. He met her gaze across distance and flame, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, not of her face, but of what she was. Not a woman on a dragon. Pivot. A new rule. Daenerys did not know why she saw him so clearly. Perhaps because she had always been drawn to those who understood the world's ugliness without loving it. A horn sounded somewhere in the city. Sharp, desperate. The defenders were regrouping. They would try to pull back to the inner walls, to the Red Keep. They would try to save their king, their queen, their secrets. Daenerys climbed higher. Drogon rose over the city, and King's Landing unfurled beneath her like a living wound. Tangled streets, leaning houses, crowded rooftops where common folk had climbed to watch the battle, their faces pale ovals in the smoke. She could have burned the city then. It would have been easy. Drogon's fire could turn streets into trenches of glass. The 9 other dragons could ignite the flea-bottom warrens until the screams became one long, thin note. She thought of Mirri Maz Duur, of the way vengeance had tasted like copper in her mouth. She thought of the woman she had been in the Red Waste, clutching eggs like stones and praying to gods she did not believe in. She thought of the priests behind her, their eyes bright with hunger for holy fire. No, she whispered, and the word was for herself as much as for Drogon. Not them. She angled Drogon toward the hill. The Red Keep rose from Aegon's high hill like a crown made of stone and arrogance. It was not beautiful up close. It was a fortress of cruelty. Every tower was a fist, every window a watching eye. She could feel the weight of history in it, the weight of a conqueror's dream turned into a prison. On its highest battlements, banners whipped in the wind. Lion and stag tangled together in a mockery of lineage. Somewhere within those walls, a boy with golden hair sat on her family's throne and laughed. Daenerys felt Drogon's eagerness spike. He wanted the keep the way a wolf wanted a throat. She let herself feel it too. Dracarys, she said, and this time there was no restraint in her voice at all. Inside the Red Keep, the air smelled of perfumed fear. Cersei Lannister had always believed fear was a weapon meant for other people. It had served her well. It had kept lords polite and servants silent, kept the city's hunger pointed away from the palace and toward itself. Fear had been her leash, her whip, her crown. Now fear was something else. A beast in the corridors, barreling through the stone like a bull in a narrow alley, knocking courtiers into walls, scattering jewels and prayers alike. The keep shook. A low roar rolled through the halls, deep enough that it did not sound like a beast at all, but like the world cracking open. Joffrey Baratheon, king, child, monster in silk, stumbled as a tremor ran beneath his feet. "What is that?" he shrieked, voice high and thin. "Mother, what is that? Tell them to stop it." Cersei's fingers dug into his arm, nails biting through velvet. "Hold your tongue," she hissed, more out of habit than certainty. Her eyes were fixed on the high windows, where torchlight flickered and smoke pressed against the glass like a living thing. "You are the king." "I am the king," Joffrey echoed, but the words sounded like a prayer rather than a proclamation. Sandor Clegane stood a few paces away, helm under one arm, his scarred face drawn tight. He was not afraid of screams. He was not afraid of blood. But fire was different. Fire had taken his skin and left him with a hatred that never cooled. He smelled it now, not torch smoke, not the city's usual stink. Something hotter, something that made his stomach clench. "Dragons," he said, voice rough as gravel. Cersei's head snapped toward him. For a heartbeat, she could not hide the crack in her composure. "There are no dragons," she said. Another tremor, harder. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling. Somewhere above, a servant screamed, and the scream cut off too quickly. Sandor's eyes narrowed. "Tell yourself whatever you like," he muttered. "Fire's fire." A door burst open at the far end of the corridor, and a man in gold cloak armor stumbled through, soot-streaked and wild-eyed. "Your Grace," he gasped, bowing too late and too shallow. "The river, Stannis' fleet, wildfire, and now. Spit it out," Cersei snapped. The man swallowed. "Dragons," he said, as if saying the word made it real and therefore fatal. 10 of them, and one bigger than. He could not finish. Joffrey's face twisted. "Kill it," he shrieked. "Kill them all. Where is my crossbow? Where are my men?" "Mother!" Cersei's mind raced, claws scrabbling for purchase. She had contingency plans for everything. For famine, for riot, for defeat, for betrayal. She had wildfire beneath the city like a nest of vipers, ready to bite anyone who dared take what was hers. She had men. She had gold. She had secrets sharp enough to cut. She did not have a plan for dragons. She thought of Aerys, of the Mad King's obsession with fire, his whispers of burning them all. She had always believed madness was weakness. Now she felt the shadow of that madness in the walls, in the trembling floor, in the heat that began to seep through stone as if the keep itself were sweating. A roar again, closer. The torches guttered. The corridor filled with a sudden gust that tasted of ash. Sandor's hand went to his sword. He did not draw it. There was no point drawing steel against fire. His gaze went to Cersei, and there was something almost pitying in it, which enraged her more than any insult. "Your lions," he said softly. "Your walls, your gold. None of it matters when the sky comes down." Cersei turned away before he could see the full depth of her fear. She grabbed Joffrey again, dragging him toward Maegor's Holdfast. The inner fortress within the fortress, thickest walls, strongest doors. If she could get him behind those doors, behind stone, behind enough layers of denial, perhaps the world would return to rules she understood. Then the first blast of dragonfire struck the outer battlements. The sound was not like normal flame. It was a hungry roar, a tearing sound, as if the air itself were being ripped apart and forced to scream. The keep screamed with it. Stone did not burn, the maester said. Daenerys watched it burn anyway. Drogon's fire struck the red keep's white walls and turned them the color of midnight. The heat was so intense it made the air shimmer, bending the view of towers into watery shapes. Mortar cracked, stone spalled. A section of battlement collapsed in a white avalanche, spilling men like dolls into the courtyard below. Daenerys guided Drogon in a wide arc, choosing her targets with a soldier's precision and a queen's cruelty. The gatehouse first, break the keep's mouth. The towers next, blind its eyes. She had learned in the Dothraki Sea how to think in terms of weakness. Every fortress had a seam. Above and behind her, the other dragons moved as she had commanded, a pack sweeping the perimeter. They burned the outer defenses, not the city. They turned trebuchets into bonfires and arrow stores into explosions. Their flames crawled along the tops of walls like living things, making defenders scatter. The Red Keep began to look less like a crown and more like a funeral pyre. On a lower terrace, she saw men in crimson cloaks and gold armor attempting to form ranks. Lannister guards, desperately disciplined. For a heartbeat, she admired the instinct. Then Ashwing swooped low and unleashed a stream of fire that ran along their line like oil. Their formation became a single writhing mass of screaming men. Discipline could not stand up under dragon flame. Nothing could. Drogon roared again, and Daenerys felt the sound in her bones. He was not simply obeying. He was exulting. The keep was heat, and heat was life to him. The priests had been right in one regard. Dragons did not grow on meat alone. They grew on fire. The more the world burned, the more they became themselves. She saw the banners on the highest tower, lion and stag, catch flame. Gold thread blackened. Cloth curled into ash. Symbols died quickly when introduced to truth. A courtyard far below erupted in green, and Daenerys's breath caught. Wildfire. Someone in the keep had triggered it, either by accident or desperation. The green bloom licked up toward the walls and clung there, refusing to die. For an instant, orange dragonfire and green alchemy flame danced together, and the sight was almost beautiful. Almost. Not that, Daenerys snapped, more sharply than she intended. Drogon banked away from the green. The priests had warned her. Wildfire was unnatural in a way that could confuse even dragonflame. It was a hunger without a mind, and it could spread beyond control. Below, King's Landing was beginning to panic. People poured into streets, pointing up, shouting, praying, running. The battle at the river was forgotten. Stannis's men on the walls faltered, staring at the burning keep as if it were the sun falling. Gold cloaks threw down spears and fled. Even hardened Seleswords reeled at the sight of the seat of power turning into a torch. Daenerys saw smoke rising from a different part of the city. Flea Bottom, perhaps, where one stray fire could become an avalanche of flame. She clenched her jaw. It would be so easy to let the city burn and call it justice. It would be so easy to become what Westeros expected of her. A dragon with a woman's face, nothing more. She did not come across the world to be easy. "Bring them down," she commanded, and her voice carried on the wind to the smaller dragons as if they were her own breath. "To the courtyards. Smother the green if you can. Break the wildfire stores. Do not ignite the streets." The dragons answered not with words, but with motion. Sky Reaver dove toward the green bloom and blasted it with orange flame, not to feed it but to starve it, burning away wooden barrels and scaffolding that would carry it farther. Two others, Sunchaser and Blackfire, swept low along the keep space, destroying storehouses with focused bursts. Above it all, Drogon climbed again, and Daenerys saw the Red Keep's highest tower, the one that held the throne room, still intact, though the windows glowed with internal fire. That was where the lie sat. That was where the boy king hid. Her heart beat hard. She thought of her father dying beneath Jaime Lannister's sword, of her brother dying beneath molten gold. She thought of years of running, of being told she was nothing but the last scrap of a dead house. She was done being scrap. "Take me to the heart," she whispered to Drogon. He folded his wings and dropped like a falling star. Tyrion Lannister had always believed in exits. Even when a room seemed sealed, there was always a crack, some small weakness in architecture or arrogance. He had survived his father's contempt by finding exits in books. He had survived court by finding exits in jokes. He had survived war by finding exits in the enemy's plans. Now the Red Keep itself was becoming an exit, bleeding fire out of every seam. He ran through corridors that shook with each distant impact, Podrick Payne stumbling after him, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with soot. The air was hot enough to dry tears before they could fall. Servants and guards surged past in both directions, some fleeing deeper into the holdfast, some trying to reach loved ones, some simply running because running was all they could think to do. Tyrion's mind worked anyway, fever fast. 10 dragons. Not 3, not rumor, 10. And one enormous, larger than any sane world should contain. He had seen it from the wall, seen its shadow swallow men whole. He had felt in that instant what it was to be a character in a story told by someone else. He hated it. He turned a corner and nearly collided with Ser Mandon Moore's corpse being dragged by 2 gold cloaks, blood slick on the floor, a reminder that men were still murdering each other even while the sky burned. Ahead, the throne room doors stood ajar, smoke seeping out. Tyrion hesitated for a heartbeat, then pushed through. The throne room was no longer a room. It was a mouth full of broken teeth. The great windows had shattered inward, raining glass across the floor. Tapestries smoldered where embers had landed. The air was thick with ash that drifted like gray snow. At the far end, the Iron Throne loomed, spiked and brutal, half lit by flame, half swallowed by smoke. Cersei was there, of course. She always was, wherever the worst decisions congregated. She dragged Joffrey toward a heavy iron door set into the side wall, Maegor's holdfast entrance, her face pale beneath smeared makeup, her eyes bright with fury that could not quite hide terror. For a moment, Daenerys saw the shape of her. A woman who had clawed for power in a world that valued her only as a womb and had turned into a knife to survive. Daenerys understood knives. She had been sharpened by necessity too. But Cersei's knife was pointed outward at everyone. Daenerys's was pointed at the world that demanded knives at all. Cersei's gaze snapped to Drogon, and something in her composure broke. She drew back as if the dragon's heat burned her from across the courtyard. Then she lifted her chin, defiance dragged up like armor. "So," she said, voice sharp, "the little exile returns." Daenerys stepped forward, boots crunching on broken stone. "You sit in my family's home," she said quietly. "You put your son on my family's throne. You fed my people lies about what we were. Now the lies have come to eat you." Cersei laughed, a brittle sound. "Your family?" she spat. "Your family was mad. Your father would have burned this city for sport. You are his daughter. I can see it in your eyes." Daenerys felt Drogon shift behind her, a low rumble building in his chest. The priest's hands lifted again, eager for permission. Daenerys raised her hand once. Stillness. Drogon stilled. Even the zealots quieted, as if the air itself held its breath. "I am not my father," Daenerys said. "And I am not you." Cersei's fingers twitched toward her gown pocket. Tyrion saw it. Daenerys saw it too because she had learned to watch hands. Hands held knives. Hands held poison. Hands held the small, hidden choices that decided whether a city lived. "Drop it," Daenerys said. Cersei's lips curled. "Or what?" Daenerys did not move. "Or you will die," she said simply, as if stating the weather. Cersei's eyes flashed. Rage, humiliation, fear. For a heartbeat, Daenerys wondered if she would do it anyway, if she would fling wildfire and damn them all just to deny Daenerys victory. Then Tyrion stepped forward, voice cutting. "Sister," he snapped, and there was iron in it. "For once in your life, stop." Cersei's gaze flicked to him, and hatred there was familiar, old, intimate. But something else crept in too. The dawning awareness that she had lost. Not a battle. Everything. Her hand loosened. A small glass vial slipped from her fingers and clinked onto stone. Daenerys exhaled once. She looked to Tyrion. "Pick it up," she ordered. Tyrion bent, retrieved the vial delicately, as if it were a snake. "A charming family heirloom," he muttered. Daenerys met his eyes. "I will not burn this city," she said, loud enough for everyone in the courtyard to hear. "Not for pleasure, not for fear. But I will burn the Red Keep until it is nothing but ash and warning. This seat was built on conquest. It will be rebuilt on truth." Cersei's face twisted. "Truth?" she spat. "There is no truth." There is only power. Daenerys stepped closer until only a few paces separated them, close enough that Cersei could feel Drogon's heat behind her like judgment. Then you understand why you are finished, Daenerys said. Daenerys did not enter the throne room as a conqueror in a song. There were no shining banners, no cheering crowds, only smoke and heat and the taste of ash on her tongue as she stepped into a courtyard within the keep where stone had cracked from dragonfire and the air itself felt bruised. Drogon crouched behind her, his bulk filling the space like night given shape. His eyes glowed molten orange, reflecting flames that still crawled along distant walls. When he breathed, heat rolled out in waves, making men recoil instinctively. Her guard, what little she had brought ashore, formed a rough line behind her. Sailors with spears, Volantene zealots with red cloth wrapped around their arms, Jorah Mormont with his hand never far from his sword as if steel could matter here. The priest stepped forward too, Benero raising his hands to the smoky sky, his voice booming as if the red god himself spoke through his lungs. "Behold," he cried, and the word echoed off cracked stone. "The fire made flesh, the queen of ash and dawn." Daenerys ignored the theatrics. She had learned that faith was useful, but it was never clean. It stained everything it touched. A door banged open across the courtyard. Men stumbled out, guards dragging wounded, servants coughing soot. Tyrion Lannister emerged among them, smaller than the soldiers around him but standing as if he were the one holding them upright. His hair was singed at the edges. Ash clung to his lashes. His eyes locked on Daenerys with startling intensity. Not hatred, not awe calculation. She studied him in return. "You are not frightened," she observed. Tyrion's mouth twitched. "I assure you," he said hoarsely, "I have rarely been more frightened in my life, but fear is distracting. I prefer to see clearly before I die." Daenerys felt a reluctant spark of amusement. "And do you think you will die?" "That depends," Tyrion said, and his gaze flicked to Drogon behind her, then back, "on whether you intend to burn the city or only the people who deserve it." Behind Tyrion, Cersei Lannister appeared in the doorway like a ghost of herself, hair disheveled, gown smeared with soot, eyes bright and furious. For a heartbeat, Daenerys saw the shape of her. A woman who had clawed for power in a world that valued her only as a womb and had turned into a knife to survive. Daenerys understood knives. She had been sharpened by necessity too. But Cersei's knife was pointed outward at everyone. Daenerys's was pointed at the world that demanded knives at all. Cersei's gaze snapped to Drogon, and something in her composure broke. She drew back as if the dragon's heat burned her from across the courtyard. Then she lifted her chin, defiance dragged up like armor. "So," she said, voice sharp, "the little exile returns." Daenerys stepped forward, boots crunching on broken stone. "You sit in my family's home," she said quietly. "You put your son on my family's throne. You fed my people lies about what we were. Now the lies have come to eat you." Cersei's eyes blazed. "Answer to what?" she spat. "The world has always belonged to people like me." Daenerys's voice went very quiet. "Not anymore," she said. Word moved faster than ravens when dragons were involved. By the time Daenerys climbed onto a scorched terrace overlooking the city, men were already gathering below in the streets. Gold cloaks without commanders, Lannister soldiers who had thrown down their arms, Stannis' men staring upward with the stunned faces of people whose god had been replaced mid-prayer. The smell of smoke and boiling pitch coated everything. Ash drifted down in lazy spirals, settling on hair and shoulders like gray snow. Drogon settled behind her on the terrace with a heavy thud that made the cracked stone groan. He folded his wings half open, not in aggression but in possession, the curve of them framing Daenerys like a living throne. His eyes tracked movement below, bright and predatory, but he did not strike. Not yet. Daenerys lifted her voice, and it carried. It always surprised her, how easily silence came when the sky itself listened. "I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen," she called, and the name felt less like a title and more like a blade drawn. The blood of old Valyria, the last daughter of King Aerys and Queen Rhllor. I have crossed the world to take what was stolen. She let the words sink in, not rushing. She saw faces below, some blank, some furious, some weeping. A woman clutched a child to her chest as if expecting flame any moment. An old man dropped to his knees and began muttering prayers to the seven. Asel's words spat on the ground and looked away, pride wounded by fear. I did not come to burn you, Daenerys continued. I did not come to punish children for the sins of lords. I did not come to make your streets run with fire. Behind her, Benero stepped forward, lifting his brazier high so its flame glowed in the ash-dark air. His voice rose in a chant, low and rhythmic, and the zealots below answered like a single throat. The sound wrapped around Daenerys' words, making them heavier, more inevitable. Daenerys glanced back once, warning. Benero dipped his head and fell silent, though his eyes still shone with devotion that bordered on hunger. I came for the Red Keep, she said, voice sharper, for the lies that live in it, for the cruelty that rots behind its walls. That cruelty ends tonight. A murmur swept the crowd. On a distant battlement near the river gate, Daenerys spotted Stannis Baratheon, hard as iron even beneath ash, his jaw clenched, his posture rigid as if refusing to bow to the sky's new law. Beside him stood Ser Davos Seaworth, torch in hand, face drawn with the exhaustion of a man who had watched too many good men die for a cause that could be rewritten in a heartbeat. Stannis' stare burned almost as hot as dragonfire. Daenerys felt it like a challenge. You! Stannis' voice carried faintly across distance, rough and furious. You would call yourself queen while my men bleed? While I have rightful claim. Daenerys did not need to shout back. Drogon's presence made the air around her a stage. Your claim is ink on paper, she answered, and her voice carried anyway. My claim is fire and blood, and I will not trade one tyrant for another. A ripple ran through Stannis' soldiers, some outraged, some uncertain. Stannis' face tightened, as if he had been struck. He took a step forward, hand on his sword hilt, and for a mad moment it looked like he might try to fight a dragon with steel out of sheer principle. Ser Davos caught his arm, said something low. Stannis froze, then forced himself still, the fury not leaving but being leashed. Daenerys respected that grudgingly. Stannis was rigid, but he was not a fool. She turned back to the people below. Lay down your arms, she commanded. Open your gates. Bring me those who have ruled you with fear, and you will live. A cry rose, half relief, half terror. Men began to drop spears. Gold cloaks looked at one another, unsure who they served now, then lowered their weapons as if suddenly ashamed. A Lannister banner-bearer let the lion cloth slip from his hands and watched it fall into soot like a dead animal. Daenerys felt the city shift beneath her words, power changing shape. Tyrion Lannister appeared at the edge of the terrace, coughing, holding the vial of wildfire she had ordered him to seize. He stepped closer, careful not to startle Drogon, and spoke quietly so only she could hear. If you truly mean to spare the city, he said, you should know this place is riddled with green fire, buried caches, enough to turn King's Landing into a funeral pyre if mishandled. Daenerys studied him. You would help me? Tyrion's mouth twisted. I would help the city, he said, then added, almost reluctantly. And I have never been particularly fond of my sister's tendency to end the world when she loses. Daenerys' gaze slid to the smoke rising from the keep's shattered towers. Somewhere within, Cersei was either captured or hiding, still dangerous as a cornered cat. Joffrey was a child with a crown who had never learned fear until now. There would be consequences. There would be executions. Mercy could not be endless, or it became weakness. But the city could not be allowed to burn, not if she intended to rule something more than ashes. Show me, Daenerys said to Tyrion. His eyes widened slightly. Then he bowed his head, not fully, not like a man surrendering his soul, like a man acknowledging a new reality. As you command, he murmured. Behind them, the Red Priests began whispering again, soft and eager, as if sensing the next stage of prophecy unfolding. Daenerys looked out over King's Landing and felt something she had not expected to feel here. Responsibility, heavy as chains and just as real. She had taken the heart. Now she had to keep the body alive. The tunnels beneath King's Landing were colder than Daenerys expected. Not in temperature, though damp stone leached warmth, but in feeling, as if the city's rot had seeped downward and settled here in the dark. Tyrion led with a torch held low, moving with the familiarity of a man who had walked these passages too many times in secrets and shame. Yora followed close behind Daenerys, every instinct in him screaming that a queen should not walk into darkness beneath an enemy city. Daenerys ignored the instinct. Queens who stayed above ground died behind walls and lies. The smell hit her first, sharp, chemical, wrong, like vinegar and smoke had a child. Tyrion stopped at an alcove and lifted his torch. Green glass jars stacked in neat rows stared back at them. Dozens, then hundreds as the light caught more and more shapes. Each jar held a viscous green substance that seemed to pulse faintly even in stillness, as if it were alive and sleeping. "Wildfire," Tyrion said, voice flat. "My sister's answer to every problem she cannot bully." Daenerys stared. "How much?" Tyrion's laugh was bitter. "Enough," he said. "Enough to make the Dragon Queen's mercy irrelevant if some fool knocks over a torch." Priestess Ysilla stepped closer, her red robes trailing. She held her own flame in a small bronze cup, the fire unnaturally steady despite the damp. In its light, the green jars looked almost beautiful, emerald jewels in the earth. "The green fire is stolen flame," Ysilla murmured. "It is not holy. It is not true." Daenerys glanced at her. "Can you control it?" Ysilla's eyes gleamed. "Control?" she echoed, as if the word were naive. "We can cleanse it. We can make it serve the rightful fire." Tyrion stiffened. "I would strongly advise against letting fanatics cleanse volatile explosives beneath a city," he said dryly. Daenerys almost smiled. "You speak boldly for a man in tunnels with a dragon queen." Tyrion spread his hands carefully. "I find honesty is all I have left." Daenerys walked deeper, torchlight throwing her shadow long and warped on the walls. She ran her fingers near one jar without touching it and felt heat radiating faintly. A trapped summer. It was wrong. It reminded her of the warlocks in Karth. Magic twisted away from nature, forced into shapes it did not want. "The Red Keep was built on conquest," Daenerys said softly, mostly to herself. "But this is built on fear." Tyrion nodded. "My family's preferred architecture." A drip echoed somewhere. The tunnels seemed to breathe. Daenerys turned, looking at the rows of jars, and made a decision. "We remove them," she said. "All of them. We do not leave this under my city." Tyrion's brows rose. "That is ambitious." "It is necessary," Daenerys said. She looked to Ysilla. "And you, no rituals near them. If one jar breaks, I will burn you myself." Ysilla bowed, lips curving as if the threat pleased her. "As you command, Mother of Dragons," Yora muttered under his breath. "They will try to use this to feed them." Daenerys did not deny it. She could feel the dragons above, even through earth and stone, a faint pressure in her mind like distant thunder. Drogon in particular, always hungry, always aware. The priests had told her wildfire could accelerate growth, that it was fire concentrated, bottled, a feast for dragons. They had offered to temper Drogon with it, to make him Valyrian reborn in years instead of decades. Daenerys had not said yes. Yet, she looked at the jars again, and for a heartbeat she imagined Drogon bigger still. Wings that could shadow entire armies, fire hot enough to melt castles like wax. The north, the wall, the darkness the priests whispered about when they thought she was asleep. A threat older than thrones. She forced herself back into the present. "We remove it," she repeated, voice hard. "And we seal these tunnels. No more hidden fire under my feet." Tyrion studied her, as if trying to find the trick. "You truly intend to rule," he said quietly. "I intend to build." Daenerys answered, and surprised herself with how much she meant it. "I have burned enough." A distant rumble sounded above them. Stone groaning, perhaps, or Drogon shifting on shattered battlements. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The tunnels felt suddenly fragile, as if even the earth remembered it was mortal beneath dragons. Tyrion lifted his torch again. "This way," he said, leading her onward into darkness full of green glass and old fear. Dawn came reluctantly, as if even the sun hesitated to rise over what had happened. King's Landing looked different in morning light. The smoke thinned enough to reveal the bones of the city, the crooked roofs, the scarred walls, the river still stained with soot and green residue where wildfire had burned itself sick. The Red Keep stood blackened on its hill, sections collapsed, towers cracked, its arrogance reduced to a warning visible for miles. Daenerys stood on a balcony whose stone had been scorched and fissured, her cloak wrapped tight against a wind that smelled of ash. Drogon loomed beside her, enormous, restless, his tail curling and uncurling like a living whip. He had not slept. He did not understand sleep the way humans did. He understood heat, movement, hunger. Even in stillness, he was coiled violence. Far below, men picked through rubble, carrying wounded, dousing small fires. Some stared up at her balcony and quickly looked away, as if eye contact might invite dragon flame. Others watched with raw hope, the kind that hurt. Behind her, the red priests knelt around small flames, murmuring prayers as if trying to stitch meaning back into the world. Their devotion felt heavier now that the keep had burned. It was one thing to worship prophecy on a distant shore. It was another to watch prophecy melt stone. Tyrion approached quietly, lantern in one hand, a scroll in the other. He looked older than he had in the tunnels, as if daylight forced reality into sharper lines. "The city is not in open revolt," he said, sounding mildly surprised by it. Yet, Daenerys did not turn. "And the boy king?" Tyrion hesitated. "Alive," he admitted, shaken, furious. "A child who has discovered fear and intends to punish everyone for it." Daenerys closed her eyes briefly. Joffrey alive meant problems. Dead meant martyrdom for people who loved the illusion of a king more than the truth of one. Either way, the realm would convulse. There was no clean path. "And Cersei Lannister?" Daenerys asked. Tyrion's mouth tightened. "Not found," he said, "which means she is hiding, or she is dead, or she is plotting." "If I had to wager, plotting," Daenerys finished. She opened her eyes and finally looked at him. "You would help me?" Tyrion's gaze flicked northward, as if he could see through smoke and hills to a place that did not yet know it was in danger. "I am on the side of the city not exploding," he said, "and on the side of my sister not turning defeat into apocalypse. Beyond that, I am improvising." Yora stepped closer, voice low. "He is dangerous." Daenerys did not deny it. "So am I," she replied. Below, along the river, Stannis Baratheon's remaining men withdrew in grim order, dragging wounded, gathering what ships remained. Stannis himself stood on the riverbank like a stubborn statue, staring up at the burned keep as if he could glare it back into obedience. Ser Davos held a torch beside him, speaking quietly. At last, Stannis turned away, the motion stiff, as if tearing himself from something he believed he deserved. He would not forget this. He would not forgive it. A man like Stannis did not bend. He broke or he burned. Daenerys watched him go and felt a strange pang. Not pity, exactly, but recognition. Stannis had been shaped by duty until it became his only language. Daenerys had been shaped by exile until fire became hers. They were not so different. That did not make him less dangerous. Tyrion offered her the scroll. "Reports," he said, "from the wall." Daenerys's fingers tightened around the parchment before she could stop them. "From the wall?" she repeated. Tyrion nodded. "The Night's Watch has been sending pleas for men and supplies for years," he said. "Most kings ignore them. Your predecessors, Baratheons, Lannisters, ignored them. But since you asked me to bring you everything that matters," he shrugged slightly, "I thought you should know what the North has been whispering." Daenerys broke the seal and scanned the rough, hurried script. Words leapt out. Dead things walking, wildlings massing, cold that did not behave like cold. Men disappearing beyond the wall. Old fears dismissed as tavern tales suddenly returning with teeth. For a moment, the ash in the air seemed to chill. The priest's voices drifted behind her, low and rhythmic. She could almost hear, beneath their chanting, the whisper they had spoken to her in Volantis when they thought she was alone with flame. The darkness comes. The fire must rise first. Drogon shifted, sensing her tension, his claws scraping stone. His massive head angled toward the north as if he too could smell something on the wind. His nostrils flared, inhaling the world like prey. Daenerys looked out over King's Landing and felt the Iron Throne's presence behind her. Even half-melted, even buried under smoke. The throne had been the shape of her dreams for so long that she had forgotten to ask what came after winning it. Now the answer was on a crude scroll in her hands. "The realm fights itself," she murmured, more to herself than to Tyrion, "while the real war gathers in the dark." Yora's voice was wary. "You cannot chase shadows while your enemies still breathe in this city." Daenerys turned her head slightly, enough that he could see her profile. "Then we make this city safe," she said. "We remove the wildfire. We take Cersei. We decide what becomes of the boy king. We break the chains of this court and build something that can stand." Tyrion watched her carefully. "And then?" he asked. Daenerys lifted her gaze to the north, to the unseen line of the wall, to the cold waiting beyond it. "And then we save the north," she said. Behind her, Benerro rose from prayer, eyes shining as if dawn itself were a sign meant for him alone. "The Fire Queen turns her face to the true enemy," he proclaimed softly, almost reverently. "This is the path." Daenerys did not answer him. She did not want her choices framed as prophecy. She wanted them framed as will. Drogon lowered his head until his hot breath washed over her hair, and she reached up without fear and rested her hand against the hard ridge of his jaw. His scales were warm, alive, real. Not a symbol, not a story, a weapon, a companion, a burden. "I will not be late," she whispered, so quietly only Drogon could hear. "Not like they were." The morning wind carried ash across the balcony, and it clung to her fingers like gray snow as she held the scroll from the wall and stared into a future that smelled of smoke and ice. The city did not wake so much as crawl. King's Landing dragged itself out of night on broken nails, coughing smoke, blinking through ash that clung to skin and hair like a second shroud. The streets were wet with bucket water and black slush where the soot had mixed with yesterday's rain. Men in gold cloaks moved in knots without clear direction, shouting orders that sounded wrong in their mouths, because the voice they had learned to obey had burned with the keep. Daenerys walked among them anyway. Yora had argued, of course. A queen should not step into the street before she had a throne beneath her and a wall of swords at her back. A queen should not risk a knife from a starving man or a thrown stone from a grieving mother. But Daenerys had seen what it meant to rule from above. Viserys barking orders at servants who hated him. Masters sitting high while slaves bled beneath their windows. She would not begin her reign as another distant shape on a hill. The stares came first. Fear sharp as vinegar. Wonder. Hatred from those who had lost kin in the night's chaos. A few knees bent. More did not because they were brave, but because they did not know whether kneeling saved you from dragons or invited them. A woman with a burned cheek held out a swaddled infant, the child's face gray with ash. "Is it done?" she rasped. "Is the war done?" Daenerys stopped. Tyrion hovered at her shoulder like a wary shadow, as if any pause in a crowd was a chance for death. Yora's hand hovered near his sword. Daenerys looked at the child and felt something not inside her. Soft and ugly, the ache of responsibility. "The battle is done," she said, choosing her words carefully. "The war can be if you let it." The woman's eyes flicked past Daenerys to the hill. where Drogon crouched on a blackened tower, head lifted, smoke curling from his nostrils as if he breathed the city's ruin back into the sky. The woman flinched and pulled the child closer. "If we let it," she repeated bitterly, like a curse. A boy ran past with a bucket too heavy for him, sloshing water onto his boots. Behind him, two men hauled a cart piled with corpses wrapped in stained linen. A septon walked with them, murmuring prayers that sounded thin against the scrape of wheels over stone. The scent of death clung to the city like smoke. Tyrion cleared his throat quietly. "The granaries," he said, voice low so only Daenerys heard. "If you don't open them soon, hunger will do what dragons did not." Daenerys nodded. "Then we open them." Yora's jaw tightened. "And feed the city with whose stores?" "With the stores of those who fattened themselves while the city starved," Daenerys said, loud enough for the nearest onlookers to hear. The words rippled outward. Heads turned. A few faces changed, not to love, not yet, but to attention. Attention was the first brick in any new order. They passed a broken fountain where green residue still stained the stone, a sickly smear left by wildfire. Daenerys paused, staring at it. Even in daylight, it looked wrong, like rot made luminous. Tyrion followed her gaze. "That," he said quietly, "is why you must decide quickly what the Red Keep becomes. Can't stay a ruin full of secrets. Ruins breed stories. Stories breed knives." Daenerys thought of her father's ghosts, of the keep's hidden jars of green fire, of Cersei's hand twitching toward a vial in the smoke. "It becomes a warning," she said, "and a foundation." They reached a crossroads where a line of gold cloaks had formed a crude barrier, trying to keep crowds from surging toward a cart of bread. The men looked exhausted, their eyes raw from smoke and sleeplessness. One recognized Tyrion and stiffened, then recognized Daenerys and went pale. "Stand down," Tyrion told them sharply, then softened his voice a fraction. "You're not holding back an enemy. You're holding back hunger. Let her speak." Daenerys stepped forward, letting the crowd see her face. "There will be bread," she said. "There will be water. There will be order. But if you loot, if you kill, if you light fires in these streets..." She lifted her gaze toward the hill. As if summoned by her attention, Drogon shifted, claws scraping stone. His wings flexed half open, sending a gust down through the city that stirred ash into a gray swirl. People gasped. Some stumbled back. A child began to cry. Daenerys did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Then you will learn what it is to lose everything," she finished. The crowd held its breath. Then an old man near the front, face lined like cracked leather, lowered himself slowly to his knees. "Our queen," he whispered, and the words were not worship so much as surrender to the obvious. Daenerys watched the kneeling spread like a tide. Not everyone, not even most, but enough that the gold cloak's shoulders eased, that the cart of bread moved forward without being overturned, that the city's frantic pulse slowed by the smallest fraction. A realm did not heal in a day, but it could begin. The throne room smelled like wet charcoal and old lies. Daenerys stood where kings had sat and watched the Iron Throne sag in ruin, its blades softened by heat, its cruel angles drooping like the melted ribs of some dead beast. It should have satisfied her, this proof that the symbol that haunted her childhood could be broken. Instead, she felt only a grim clarity. A throne was easy to destroy. The hunger it represented was harder. Tyrion laid maps across a scorched table that had once hosted feasts. He moved with the briskness of a man who had found purpose in catastrophe. "The city's granaries will last 3 weeks if distributed properly," he said. "Less if the docks remain closed and the river remains fouled." Yora stood near a broken doorway, watching shadows as if expecting assassins to crawl out of smoke. "And if Tywin Lannister arrives with an army," he growled, 3 weeks will be generous." At the mention of Tywin, Grand Maester Pycelle made a small sound like a frightened animal. He hovered near the edge of the room, ash clinging to his beard, chains around his throat dulled by soot. He looked at Daenerys as if she were a plague-given skin. "Tell me," Daenerys said, turning her head toward him. How many ravens can you send in a day, Grand Maester Pycelle? Pycelle swallowed. As many as your grace requires. Good, Daenerys said. You will send ravens to every lord who still has a castle. You will tell them the war for King's Landing is ended. You will tell them any who bring steel to my gates will be fed to my dragons. And you will tell them I call for truce, because the North is calling for help. Benero's eyes brightened at the mention of the North, as if the word itself was a lit candle. The darkness, he murmured, reverent. She speaks of the true war. Daenerys did not look at him. I speak of men freezing and dying while southern lords play at crowns, she said. Not prophecy. A soft rustle came from the far end of the room, where a curtain should have been hanging but now lay burned away. A pale figure stepped forward with hands folded, as if he had been there all along and simply waited for the moment to become visible. Lord Varys smiled gently. Your Grace, he said. Yora's hand snapped to his sword. Tyrion stiffened, then let out a slow breath that could have been relief or dread. Daenerys studied Varys. Plump, smooth-faced, dressed in pale robes that seemed miraculously untouched by ash. His eyes held no open threat, which made them more dangerous. Men like Varys did not threaten. They arranged. You watched while my family fell, Daenerys said. Varys bowed his head. A small dip, the humility of someone who knew how to survive. I watched while many fell, he murmured. And I learned that survival without purpose is hollow. Daenerys walked toward him, boots crunching on broken glass. What is your purpose now? Varys lifted his gaze. The realm, he said simply. It has been bleeding for too long. A ruler who can end the bloodshed is rare. Tyrion let out a humorless laugh. You always were fond of rare things. Varys turned his smile toward him. And you always mistook cynicism for armor, my lord. Daenerys held up a hand before they could bite each other further. If you serve the realm, she said to Varys, you serve me. And if you serve me, you tell me where Cersei Lannister is. For the first time, Varys's composure shifted, a tiny tightening around the eyes. Not in the holdfast, he said. Not on any ship. Not in any tower I can find. She knows these walls too well. Tyrion's jaw clenched. Then she's in the tunnels. Varys's gaze flicked to him. There are many tunnels, he said softly, and not all of them lead somewhere pleasant. Daenerys looked at the melted throne again. She will not be allowed to become a story, she said. Stories breed knives. She turned back to them. Tyrion with his maps, Yora with his suspicion, Pycelle with his fear, Varys with his secrets, the priests with their hunger. This was her court now, ashen opportunists. Listen, Daenerys said, voice steady. We will hold this city. We will feed it. We will remove the wildfire. We will find Cersei Lannister and her son and end their claim. And then we will turn north. Yora frowned. North? Before you secure the Reach? Before you break the Westerlands? Daenerys met his gaze. If the wall falls, she said, there will be no Reach to secure. Silence answered her, heavy as smoke. Then Tyrion, of all people, nodded once. Finally, he murmured. Someone in this cursed city who understands priorities. Order did not arrive with banners. It arrived with lists. Daenerys learned that by midday, Tyrion's hands moved constantly. Scribbling, sealing, dispatching runners, sending gold cloaks to count sacks of grain and barrels of water, ordering the city watch to guard bakeries rather than brothels. He was relentless in a way that reminded Daenerys of old women in flea markets, sharp-eyed and harder to cheat than any lord. You're enjoying this, she observed as he pressed wax into a seal. Tyrion snorted. Enjoying? No, but it turns out I'm very good at putting out fires, he said, and his eyes flicked toward the hill where black smoke still rose from the keep's broken towers. Usually metaphorical. Today, less so. Varys drifted through the courtyard like a pale ghost, murmuring to men Daenerys never saw approach, then vanish. Every so often he would return with a piece of information placed delicately into her hand. A list of storehouses, a name of a captain likely to betray, a rumor of where Cersei might have slipped. Jorah hated him immediately. "He smiles too much," he muttered. "He smiles because it keeps him alive," Daenerys replied, watching Varys speak quietly to a gold cloak captain and then glide away. "You would do the same if you had his enemies." Jorah's mouth tightened. He would never admit it, but she saw the truth in his eyes. Jorah survived by bluntness and loyalty. Varys survived by softness and secrets. Both were forms of armor. The priests were a constant heat at her back. They had set braziers around the courtyard, their flames small but unnaturally steady. They chanted softly as if weaving a net of sound over the keep's ruined heart. Above, 3 of the mid-sized dragons roost on broken walls like gargoyles come to life. Sunchaser with scales the color of pale gold, Blackfire dark as burned wood, Ashwing mottled gray and red. Their eyes tracked every movement below, making even hardened gold cloaks swallow when they walked beneath their shadows. Daenerys watched a line of small folk form near a table where bread was being distributed. Not a riot, a line. People holding children, clutching bowls, waiting. It was a fragile thing, that line, like a thin thread stretched across a chasm. A baker's wife stepped forward and received a loaf with trembling hands. She looked up at Daenerys, then quickly bowed her head. "Thank you," she whispered, as if the words might anger a dragon. Daenerys's throat tightened unexpectedly. Gratitude was a strange thing to receive in a city she had conquered by fire. Felt like stepping onto ice and realizing it held. Tyrion followed her gaze. "If you want them to stop fearing you," he said quietly, "you'll need more than bread." "I know," Daenerys said. "What will you give them?" Tyrion asked. Daenerys looked at the melted throne's shadow stretching across the courtyard. "Truth," she said, and surprised herself again. "Justice, and something to believe in besides fear." Tyrion's expression softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again into practicality. "Then we must deal with the lions," he said. "Tywin Lannister will not accept this quietly, nor will the Tyrells, if they smell weakness." Daenerys's gaze snapped toward the south road, beyond the city's walls. "How far are they?" Varys appeared at her elbow as if conjured. "Very near," he said softly. "Lord Tywin was marching to relieve the city. He will be displeased to find the city already relieved." Jorah spat. "Let him come. The dragons will. The dragons will frighten him." Tyrion cut in. "But fear is not the same as defeat. Tywin Lannister is a man who turns fear into plans." Daenerys's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Then we make him plan around a new reality," she said. "We parley." Jorah looked as if he wanted to argue again, but Drogon's roar rolled over the city from the hill, deep and impatient, and even Jorah fell silent. The dragons did not like waiting. Neither did queens. Daenerys turned to Tyrion. "You will come with me," she said, "and you will speak to your father." Tyrion's face went very still. "You ask a great deal," he said softly. Daenerys met his eyes without blinking. "I burned the Red Keep," she replied. "I ask what I must." Tyrion swallowed. Then slowly he nodded. Tywin Lannister did not look up often. The world usually came to him, kneeling, pleading, bargaining, bleeding. He had made the great lords of Westeros into pieces on a board and moved them with cold fingers. He had broken houses the way other men broke bread. He had raised his family's name from mockery to fear and called it legacy. So when the sky darkened above his camp and horses screamed, it took a heartbeat longer than it should have for his eyes to lift. Drogon's shadow rolled over the tents like night spilling across land. Men stumbled back, faces upturned, spears trembling in their hands. A few brave fools raised bows. Their commanders slapped the weapons down, hissing. No one wanted to be the man who loosed an arrow at a dragon and learned, in the next breath, what pride cost. Tywin's gaze followed the shadow up and stayed there. He did not flinch, not outwardly, but the muscles in his jaw tightened, the smallest betrayal of what he felt. The dragon descended in a slow, deliberate spiral, heat washing over the camp in waves. Canvas snapped, torches guttered, dust rose and swirled. Drogon landed at the edge of the open space before Tywin's command tent with a heavy impact that made men stagger. His wings flexed, his head lowered, eyes molten, breath rolling out like furnace wind. Daenerys slid from his back with practiced ease and stepped forward, her boots pressing into trampled grass. Tyrion walked beside her, shoulders squared, face composed in a way that had taken him years to master. Mask over fear, mask over hate. Yora followed half a step behind, hand near his sword, as if the steel could protect Daenerys from the cold eyes ahead. Tywin stood in crimson and gold, a lion made human. Ser Kevan Lannister loomed at his shoulder. Nearby, Mace Tyrell stood in green and gold, his face pinched with uncertainty. Olenna Tyrell sat in a litter, her sharp eyes measuring everything. Margaery Tyrell stood poised beside her, beautiful as a painted saint and twice as dangerous. Tywin's gaze fixed on Daenerys. "So," he said, voice calm as still water, "the dead dragon spawn lives." Daenerys did not react to the insult. "The lion still prowls," she replied. Tywin's eyes flicked briefly to Tyrion, a glance that held years of contempt in a heartbeat. "And my son walks at your side like a pet." Tyrion's mouth tightened, but he did not look away. "It seems I've always had a talent for disappointing you," he said dryly. Tywin ignored him. He addressed Daenerys as if Tyrion were smoke. "You burned the Red Keep," he said. "You killed men sworn to their king. You bring foreign fanatics and monsters to our shores. Explain why I should not cut you down and end this madness." Daenerys smiled faintly. "Because you cannot," she said. A murmur ran through the gathered lords. Mace Tyrell's face flushed. Ser Kevan's hand went to his sword. Olenna's eyes gleamed with something like delight. Tywin's gaze stayed steady. "Arrogance," he said, "common in children." Daenerys stepped closer, letting the heat of Drogon press behind her words like a threat. "Reality," she corrected. "You have marched to relieve a city that no longer belongs to you. You have brought an army that will burn if it tries to take what I have claimed." Tywin's lips thinned. "And what do you offer in exchange for my restraint?" Daenerys did not hesitate. "Peace," she said. "You will withdraw your host. You will send ravens to every lord in the Westerlands and the Reach declaring the war ended. You will renounce Joffrey's claim. In return, I will not burn your lands." Mace Tyrell made a choking sound. Margaery's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed, calculating. Olenna leaned forward slightly in her litter, like an old hawk watching prey. Tywin's voice remained calm. "You ask me to kneel. I ask you to live," Daenerys said. Tywin's gaze flicked to Drogon again, then to the other dragons circling high above, smaller but still monstrous shapes against the ash-tinted sky. For the first time, Daenerys saw something behind his composure. A man counting, recalculating, realizing that the board he had mastered had been set on fire. "You have no army," Tywin said, testing. "Only beasts." Daenerys' smile did not fade. "I have a city," she said. "I have the sea, I have fire, and I have what you lack." Tywin's brow twitched. "And what is that?" Daenerys' eyes went briefly north, as if she could see beyond walls and roads to the cold edge of the world. "Purpose," she said. "Beyond your family name." Olenna's laugh was soft and sharp. "Oh," she murmured. "I like her." Tywin's gaze snapped to Olenna, then back to Daenerys. "Purpose does not feed men," he said. Daenerys held his gaze. "Then help me feed them," she said. "Not for me, for the realm. Winter is coming, Lord Tywin. Your wars are petty compared to what will come down from the north." Margaery's eyes flicked to Olenna, then back. "If you speak of winter," she said lightly, "you speak of the north. And if you speak of the north, you speak of House Stark." Daenerys turned her head slightly toward Margaery. "Yes," she said, I intend to speak to the Starks. The camp seemed to hold its breath. Tywin's mouth tightened. You will find the wolves do not bend easily, he said. Daenerys's voice was soft and absolute. Neither do dragons. Negotiation with Tywin Lannister was not like bargaining with a merchant. Merchants wanted profit. Tywin wanted dominance. He did not trade unless the trade left him taller than the man across from him. They sat beneath an awning that smelled of horse and dust, a map table between them. Daenerys took the offered cup of wine and did not drink, letting the steam rise to her face. Tywin did not touch his cup at all. Tyrion sat between them like a piece of meat offered to two knives. Olenna Tyrell watched from the side, her gaze flicking between faces as if memorizing every twitch. Margaery sat poised, hands folded, her expression gentle enough to fool a septa and sharp enough to fool no one who had ever survived court. Tywin's voice was measured. You have made a spectacle, he said.
Spectacle fade.
Armies remain. Daenerys leaned back slightly. Armies burn, she said. Tywin's eyes narrowed. Even dragons can be killed. Yora's posture tightened, but Daenerys did not move. Perhaps, she said, but not by men who have never seen them before today. Tywin's gaze slid to Tyrion, as if seeking weakness in the familiar. You have chosen interesting allies, he said to Daenerys, but the contempt was meant for Tyrion. Tyrion's mouth twisted. It seems I've always had a talent for disappointing you, he said. Margaery's lips curved faintly, as if amused despite herself. Olenna's eyes gleamed. Daenerys ignored the barbs and tapped the map. You marched to save King's Landing, she said. You can still do it. Withdraw your host peacefully. Help restore trade. Let the city eat. Tywin's gaze did not drop to the map. And in return, you promise not to set my lands on fire, he said, as if she were offering him a crumb. Daenerys's eyes hardened. In return, she said, I allow your house to continue existing. The tent went very still. Outside, Drogon's low rumble vibrated through the ground like distant thunder, as if the dragon were listening. Olenna chuckled softly. She speaks like a conqueror, she murmured, almost approving. Tywin's mouth tightened. Conquerors marry, he said, to bind what they take. Margaery's gaze sharpened, a flicker of interest behind her calm. Tyrion's expression went blank, as if he had expected this and hated that he had. Daenerys understood immediately what Tywin was offering. A chain made of silk, a wedding to tie her dragons to his gold, to claim her power as if it were another prize. I will not be bred like a mare for your alliance, Daenerys said quietly. Tywin's eyes remained cold. Then you will rule alone, he said, and alone you will fall. Daenerys smiled faintly. I am not alone, she said, and though she did not point, the shadow of Drogon beyond the tent made the words heavy. Margaery spoke gently, as if offering honey. There are other alliances, she said, other ways to bind peace without offense. Daenerys turned her gaze to her, studying. You mean to sit a Tyrell on every throne? Daenerys said, not unkindly, as if naming a known truth. Margaery's smile did not change. I mean to save the realm, she replied smoothly. Olenna's laughter was sharper this time. Oh, darling, she said. We always mean to save the realm. Daenerys held their eyes, then returned to Tywin. Here is what I offer, she said. You withdraw your army to the South Bank and hold it there for 7 days. In that time, trade resumes. Bread moves. Fires are extinguished. If the city calms, you will march home. If the city riots, you may return to your tents and pretend you came to stop chaos. Tywin's gaze narrowed. It was a concession disguised as a favor, something he could accept without kneeling, something that preserved his pride and gave him time to assess. And what of the boy king? Tywin asked. Daenerys's voice went cold. He is not your king anymore, she said. Tywin's eyes flicked to Tyrion again. And my daughter? Daenerys held his gaze. She will be found, she said, and she will answer. Tywin's jaw tightened. For the first time, anger showed clearly. "No one makes a Lannister answer," he said. Daenerys' smile vanished. "Then learn," she said. Tywin stared at her for a long moment, weighing fire against pride. At last, he inclined his head barely. "Not submission. Agreement to delay." 7 days, he said. Daenerys rose smoothly. 7 days, she echoed. Outside, the wind shifted. The scent of ash drifted over Tywin's camp like a reminder that the world had changed and would not change back for any lion. Stannis Baratheon smelled like salt, smoke, and stubbornness. He waited on the riverbank amid charred wreckage. His men gathered behind him in grim silence. The Blackwater lapped at blackened timbers and floating corpses. Here and there, sickly green residue still clung to the water like mold, refusing to be washed away. The air was cold despite the fires, as if the river remembered winter more than summer. Ser Davos stood beside Stannis, his face lined with exhaustion, his eyes alert. He looked at Daenerys the way a sailor looked at an approaching storm, aware that it could kill him, aware that it could also carry him somewhere new. Daenerys approached with Tyrion and Jorah flanking her. She wore no crown, only a dark cloak and the weight of the city behind her. Above, Drogon perched on a broken section of wall like a watchful god, his massive head angled down, eyes glowing faintly. Stannis' gaze fixed on Daenerys. He did not bow. He did not soften. "You stole my victory," he said. Daenerys' lips curved faintly, without humor. "You were about to burn a city to take a chair," she replied. "If that is victory, you can keep it." Stannis' eyes flashed. "That chair is the realm," he snapped. "Without it, there is no law, no order, only warlords and beasts." Daenerys lifted her chin slightly, letting him see she did not fear his anger. "The law you offer is steel," she said. "The order you offer is obedience. I have seen enough of both." Stannis took a step forward, boots sinking into mud. "You call yourself queen," he said, voice rough. "By what right?" Daenerys' answer came easily. "By blood," she said. "By conquest. By necessity." Stannis' mouth tightened. "Necessity," he repeated with contempt. "A pretty word for force." Ser Davos shifted, clearing his throat gently. "Your Grace," he said to Daenerys, and there was something careful in his tone, respect offered without surrender. "We came to end a usurper's rule. You've ended it in your own fashion. But what now? Will you burn us too?" Daenerys looked at Davos, seeing the honesty there, the weary decency. "No," she said simply. "I have no quarrel with men who fight for what they believe is right. I have a quarrel with men who believe the world belongs to them." Stannis' eyes narrowed. "And you do not?" Daenerys' gaze flicked briefly toward Drogon's shadow, then back. "I believe the world belongs to those who can protect it," she said. "And I intend to." Stannis' jaw clenched. "From what?" he demanded. Daenerys held up the scroll Tyrion had brought her, the parchment now creased from being gripped too tightly. "From what comes from the north," she said. Stannis scoffed, a short, bitter sound. "Old wives' tales." Ser Davos did not scoff. His eyes stayed on the parchment, then lifted to Daenerys' face. "The Night's Watch sends ravens for a reason," he said quietly. Stannis' gaze snapped to him. "Enough." Davos bowed his head slightly, but he did not look away from Daenerys. "If there is truth in it," he said, "the realm will need more than crowns." Daenerys felt something settle inside her, an understanding that the Onion Knight, of all people, might be the bridge between stubborn kings and necessary wars. She turned her gaze back to Stannis. "Here is what I offer you," she said. Stannis' eyes narrowed. "I do not take gifts," he said harshly. "I take what is mine." Daenerys' voice did not rise. "Dragonstone," she said. "You may keep it, rule it, hold it in my name or in your own if you cannot swallow loyalty. But you will not bring war to King's Landing while I restore order. And when I call the realm north, you will come." Stannis' laugh was sharp and humorless. "You would command me," he said, as if tasting poison. I would recruit you, Daenerys corrected. You want to be king because you believe law matters. Prove it matters beyond your pride. Stannis stared at her for a long moment, anger and calculation warring in his face. Pride wanted him to spit. Sense, hard, reluctant, forced him still. At last he spoke, voice like iron scraped raw. I will not bend the knee. Daenerys nodded once, accepting. Then do not, she said. But do not pretend your refusal changes the sky. Above them, Drogon shifted, wings flexing. Heat rolled over the riverbank. Stannis's men flinched. Stannis did not. Ser Davos exhaled slowly, as if releasing breath he had been holding since dawn. He looked at Daenerys and, for a heartbeat, there was something like gratitude in his eyes. Gratitude that she had not burned them simply because she could. When Daenerys turned to leave, Stannis's voice followed her like a thrown knife. If you fail, he called, the realm will drown in your fire. Daenerys did not look back. Then I will learn to be water, she replied, and walked away with the river's cold wind at her back. Cersei Lannister did not know how to lose. She knew how to retreat, how to feign weakness, how to turn a step back into a plan forward. She knew how to smile while sharpening a knife, but she did not know how to accept that a game had ended with her still on the board. So she ran. The secret passages of the Red Keep had been her refuge for years. Veins beneath stone, threaded through walls like hidden thoughts. She had walked them in silk and in fury, in triumph and in fear, always certain that the keep belonged to her because she knew its secrets. Now the keep was half-burned, trembling with each gust of wind, and its secrets felt smaller than they had. Her gown snagged on a rough stone edge and tore. She barely noticed. Her hand clenched around the small green vial hidden in her palm, glass cool against her skin. The wildfire inside pulsed faintly, hungry. If she could reach the right place. One cache, one torch, she could deny the Dragon Queen victory. She could turn Daenerys's mercy into ash and prove that power belonged to those ruthless enough to use it. A sound behind her, boots on stone, distant voices, and Cersei's breath hitched. The keep was full of enemies now. Even the walls felt hostile. She turned a corner and froze. Sandor Clegane stood half in shadow, helmet off, his scarred face lit by torchlight that made the burned skin shine. He looked like a man carved from old resentment. His eyes slid to the vial in her hand and narrowed. The Hound? Cersei breathed, and she tried to make her voice command again. You, come with me. Sandor's mouth twitched, a grimace that might have been a smile if he remembered how. Come with you, he echoed. To do what? Burn the world. Cersei's eyes flashed. To save it, she lied, and the lie tasted familiar. Sandor stepped closer, slow, cautious, like approaching a dog that might bite. You're not saving anything, he said. You're throwing a tantrum. Cersei's nails dug into the vial. Move, she hissed. Sandor did not. His gaze held hers, and for a heartbeat Cersei saw something behind his hatred, fear, but not for her, for fire, for what she held. You light that, Sandor said, voice low and shaking, and you'll kill everyone, even your precious boy. Cersei's lips curled. He is a king, she spat. He's a child, Sandor said, and the word came out like a confession. His eyes flicked away, as if the thought of children burned worse than wildfire. Cersei's breath came faster. You were paid to protect him, she snapped, trying to seize the old chain of authority. Sandor's face tightened. I was paid to stand near monsters, he said. I'm tired of it. A distant roar rolled through the tunnels, Drogon somewhere above, a reminder that the sky itself belonged to Daenerys now. Cersei's composure cracked. She shoved past Sandor, shoulder hitting his chest. Sandor caught her wrist. The touch was iron. Cersei hissed and tried to yank free, but Sandor's grip tightened. His gaze locked on the vial. Give it, he growled. Cersei's eyes went wild. No, she whispered, and then she lunged, trying to bite, to scratch, to do anything. Sandor shoved her back hard, and she stumbled, nearly falling. The vial clinked against stone but did not break. Then footsteps thundered closer, voices cutting through the tunnel's damp air. "Cersei!" Tyrion's voice, sharp as a whip. Cersei's head snapped toward the sound. Panic surged. She raised the vial as if it were a dagger. Daenerys appeared around the corner a heartbeat later, torchlight catching in her silver hair, her face calm in a way that made Cersei hate her instantly. Yora followed with sword drawn, eyes fierce. Tyrion stepped forward, breathing hard, his gaze fixed on the vial like a man staring at a snake poised to strike. For a moment, the tunnel held them all in a tight, ugly tableau. A queen of ash, a lioness with fire in her hand, a brother who had spent his life cleaning up his sister's madness, a scarred dog trembling at the scent of flame. Daenerys spoke first. "Drop it," she said. Cersei laughed, high and thin. "You think you've won," she rasped. "You think dragons make you safe." Daenerys's eyes did not blink. "Dragons make me dangerous," she corrected. "You make yourself pathetic." Cersei's face twisted. "I am power," she hissed. Daenerys stepped closer, heat from her torch painting her features in gold. "No," she said softly. "You are fear pretending it is power." Cersei's fingers tightened, and Sandor Clegane moved. He slammed his fist into Cersei's wrist with brutal efficiency. The vial flew from her hand, spinning end over end. Tyrion lunged and caught it against his chest as if catching it could save the world. He froze, breath held, waiting for glass to shatter. It did not. Cersei stared at her empty hand, horror flickering for the first time. "You," she breathed at Sandor, betrayal sharp. Sandor's face contorted, disgust and fear tangled. "I'm done," he muttered. Yora grabbed Cersei's arm and twisted it behind her back. She hissed and struggled, but she was only human, and her strength was in control, not muscle. Daenerys stepped forward until she was close enough to see the soot streaks on Cersei's cheeks. "You will live," she said. "Long enough to answer." Cersei's eyes blazed. "Answer to what?" she spat. "The world has always belonged to people like me." Daenerys's voice went very quiet. "Not anymore," she said. Joffrey Baratheon arrived screaming. They brought him into the ruined hall beneath guard. 2 gold cloaks and 3 Volantene zealots with red cloth wrapped around their arms as if it made them brave. The boy king fought them all the way, twisting, spitting, kicking, his torn crimson cloak dragging through ash like a wounded banner. "Unhand me," he shrieked. "I am your king. I will have your heads. Mother!" Cersei stood in chains nearby, her hair disheveled, her face bruised where Yora's grip had been unforgiving. She held herself upright anyway, chin lifted, eyes burning with hatred so pure it looked almost clean. Daenerys watched Joffrey the way one watched a rabid dog. Dangerous, pathetic, tragic only if you were foolish enough to step close. She sat on a simple wooden chair set before the melted remnants of the Iron Throne, refusing to perch on the ruin as if it were still sacred. Tyrion stood to her right, the wildfire vial cradled carefully in his hands. Varys hovered like a pale ghost. Pycelle trembled. Yora stood like a wall. Joffrey's gaze snapped to Daenerys, and his face twisted with fury. "You," he spat, "you burned my castle." "I burned the Red Keep," Daenerys corrected. "It was never yours." Joffrey's laughter was brittle. "Everything is mine," he snarled, and for a heartbeat Daenerys saw Cersei in him, the same hunger wearing a child's face. Daenerys's voice remained calm. "You ordered children beaten," she said. "You starved the city while you feasted. You sent men to kill those who spoke against you. You murderade Ned Stark." At that last name, a murmur rippled through the gathered captains and city leaders. Even now, the memory of the Stark Lord's death still had teeth. Joffrey's face went red. "He was a traitor," he shrieked. "He confessed." "He confessed because you held his daughters hostage," Daenerys said. Joffrey's gaze flicked to Cersei, seeking reassurance like a child. Cersei's eyes met his and, for the first time, softened just a fraction. A mother's love, twisted and fierce. "He is a king," Cersei said, voice rough but steady. "You have no right to judge him." Daenerys turned her gaze to Cersei. "I have every right," she said. "I have the city. I have the dragons. I have the blood you tried to erase." Cersei's lips curled. "And you have madness," she hissed. "You will become your father. You will burn them all. It is in you." Daenerys held her gaze. "It is in me to choose," she said. Joffrey surged forward, eyes wild. "Kill her!" he screamed at the guards, as if they would obey his voice over the Dragon Queen's presence. "Kill her now!" No one moved. Joffrey's breath hitched as fear finally found him through the cracks of entitlement. His eyes darted to the broken archway, where Drogon's enormous eye was visible in the shadows outside, an amber slit watching, unblinking. Joffrey's scream turned into a thin whine. Daenerys leaned forward slightly. "You will not die today," she said. Joffrey blinked, confusion flickering. Cersei's eyes narrowed, suspicion sharp. Daenerys continued, voice measured. "You will be stripped of your crown. Your name will be recorded as a footnote of cruelty. But you will live if you accept exile." Joffrey's mouth opened, then closed, as if he did not understand the concept of being allowed to live without ruling. "Exile," he repeated, tasting the word like poison. "The wall," Daenerys said. The hall went silent. Even Tyrion's eyes widened slightly. Varys's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation. Yora's mouth tightened, uncertain. Cersei's chains rattled as she surged forward. "No," she hissed. "You will not send him to that frozen prison. You will not." Daenerys cut her off with a look. "Your son will learn what it is to serve something beyond himself," she said, "or he will die. Those are his choices." Joffrey stared, shaking, rage and terror tangled. "I won't," he whispered, voice cracking. "I won't go. I'm the king." Daenerys's voice went colder. "Kings do not scream for their mothers," she said. Joffrey flinched as if struck. His gaze flicked again to Drogon's eye, to the shadow beyond the archway. His breath came fast, shallow. He was a child in a room full of adults who had decided the world had moved on without him. At last, his voice came out small. "If I go," he whispered, "I live." Daenerys held his gaze. "If you go," she said, "you live." Cersei's face crumpled for the first time. Not into tears, but into raw fury and helplessness. "You think this is mercy," she spat. "It's cruelty dressed in virtue." Daenerys's eyes did not leave Joffrey. "It's consequence," she said. Joffrey swallowed hard. His shoulders sagged, the first true collapse of his reign. "Fine," he whispered, and the words sounded like defeat. Daenerys exhaled slowly. "Then it is done," she said. Tyrion's gaze slid to Cersei, and there was something in it like old grief. Cersei met it with pure hate. Daenerys watched them both and understood. This was not the end of the Lion's War. It was merely the moment the lion realized the cage had changed. The Red Woman came at dusk, when the city's smoke turned the sky the color of old bruises. She arrived not with an army, but with certainty, stepping from a small boat onto a dock still stained with soot. Her scarlet robes were too clean for King's Landing, as if the ash avoided her out of respect. The ruby at her throat caught torchlight and seemed to hold it, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Melisandre did not look around like a traveler. She looked ahead, as if she already knew exactly where to go. Ser Davos watched from shadows near a stack of damp nets, his face tight with worry. He had left Stannis' side only after hard words, after promises half-kept, after seeing that the world had shifted under their feet. Now he watched the Red Woman with the careful dread of a man who had seen what faith could do to good intentions. Benero met her halfway down the dock, his red robes snapping in the wind. Priestess Ysilla flanked him, her burned face lit by the small flame she carried. Behind them, Makoro moved like a dark shadow, copper rings glinting on his ears. Melisandre's gaze settled on Benero, and her lips curved slightly. "High Priest," she said, voice smooth as warmed wine. Your fires have traveled far. Benero's eyes gleamed. The Fire Queen has come, he said reverently, as if speaking to the flame itself rather than to a woman. And you have felt it. Melisandre's smile did not change. I have felt many things in the flames, she murmured. Her eyes slid past them upward. Daenerys stood on a balcony above the docks, watching. She had not announced herself. She did not need to. Drogon's silhouette crossed the sky behind her like a moving eclipse, and every head below tilted instinctively as if pulled by gravity. Melisandre's gaze locked on Daenerys, even from this distance, and the air seemed to tighten. There was no bow from Melisandre. No fear, only recognition, as if she had been waiting for this meeting her entire life. Daenerys descended to meet her, cloak trailing, footsteps steady. Yora followed, wary. Tyrion lingered behind them, watching with the expression of a man witnessing two storms decide whether to collide. When Daenerys reached the dock, Melisandre dipped her head slightly. Not submission, not reverence. A greeting between powers. You are far from Dragonstone, Daenerys said. Dragonstone is a rock, Melisandre replied. You are fire made flesh. Benero's breath caught, pleased. Scylla's eyes shone. Makoro murmured something low, almost prayerful. Daenerys held Melisandre's gaze. You served Stannis Baratheon, she said. I served what I believed, Melisandre said softly. The Lord of Light showed me a king in the flames. I followed. Sometimes the flames show us what we want to see. Ser Davos stepped forward from shadow, unable to stay silent. And sometimes they show you lies, he said, bitterness rough in his voice. Melisandre's gaze flicked to him, unreadable. Sometimes, she admitted. Daenerys watched her carefully. Why come here? She asked. To claim me? To command me? Melisandre's lips curved. To warn you, she said. Daenerys's eyes narrowed. Of what? Melisandre lifted her gaze northward, beyond the city walls, beyond the river and hills, as if she could see through distance itself. There is a darkness, she said quietly, and for the first time her voice held something like true seriousness, stripped of performance. Not a metaphor, not a tale, a cold that eats memory. It moves. Benero's eyes widened with fervor. The Great Other, he whispered. Melisandre's gaze returned to Daenerys. The flames showed me snow falling on thrones, she said, and the shadow of wings across ice. You are not meant to sit in ash and call it victory. You are meant to burn the cold. Daenerys felt the words strike something inside her. Fear, perhaps, or the shape of responsibility she had been trying not to name. She thought of the scroll from the wall. She thought of the way Drogon's head had angled north that morning as if scenting an enemy. What do you want? Daenerys asked. Melisandre's smile returned, smaller now. To stand near the fire, she said. To help you see what the world refuses to see. Tyrion stepped closer, voice dry. A comforting proposition, he murmured. More priests. Daenerys did not take her eyes off Melisandre. If you serve me, she said, you do not command me. Melisandre inclined her head. As you command, your grace, she said, and the words sounded almost like amusement. Daenerys felt the dock's torches flicker in a sudden wind, and for a heartbeat she imagined ice breathing somewhere far away, patient, waiting. She did not like the feeling, but she would rather know than be surprised. Then come, Daenerys said. Melisandre's eyes glinted like rubies catching flame. Gladly, she murmured. Night returned with quieter teeth. The screams had faded to murmurs. The fires had been beaten down to embers. The city lay uneasy beneath ash-dark sky, as if King's Landing itself were holding breath, waiting to see if the Dragon Queen's mercy would last longer than a day. On a rooftop near the shattered keep, Daenerys stood beside a raven cage while Tyrion wrote by torchlight, his quill scratching like an insect. Melisandre watched from near a small fire that burned too steadily for mere wood. Yora stood near the edge of the roof, scanning the sky as if expecting arrows to appear out of darkness. Daenerys took a parchment from Tyrion's hand and read the first line again, ensuring the words were what she wanted them to be, not what a court would soften them into. To Robb Stark, King in the North. She paused at the title. The realm was fractured enough already, but she did not want to begin by denying a wolf's pride. Pride was often the only shield men had left. I hold King's Landing. The Lannisters' claim is ended. I ask truce, not submission. The wall sends word of a threat that does not care for crowns. Meet my envoys. Speak with me. Let us end the Southern War before the North pays for it in blood. She rolled the parchment and sealed it, then strapped it to the raven's leg. The bird shifted, uneasy in her hands, feeling the heat of her skin, the scent of smoke that clung to her hair. "Fly," she whispered, and released it. The raven launched into the night, wings beating hard, vanishing into the smoky dark. Tyrion slid another parchment toward her. "The Night's Watch," he said quietly. Daenerys sealed that one too, her fingers steady. She had never sent orders to the wall before. Felt like speaking to the edge of the world. Melisandre's voice drifted softly. "They will not believe," she murmured. "Not until the cold touches their bones." Daenerys did not look at her. "Then we will be there before it does," she said. She turned as Rhaegal and Viserion approached the rooftop edge, their scales catching torchlight, green and pale gold gleaming like living gems. They were smaller than Drogon, but still large enough that their wing beats made the air tremble. Leather satchels had been strapped carefully to their bodies, messages sealed inside, raven-proof, wind-proof, meant to cross distance faster than any bird. Jorah watched them with wary respect. "You trust them to carry words?" he asked. Daenerys' gaze softened slightly as she looked at the dragons. "They carry more than words," she said. "They carry warning." Tyrion dipped his quill again. "And intimidation," he added. Daenerys did not deny it. "Sometimes the realm needs to be frightened into survival," she said. Rhaegal crouched, muscles coiling, then sprang from the rooftop. Viserion followed, their wings catching night air, lifting them into the smoky sky. They climbed fast, two streaks of living power vanishing northward. Above, Drogon perched on the highest broken tower, a shadow among shadows. His head tracked the departing dragons, then turned slowly toward the north as if listening to something the city could not hear. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting stars that struggled to shine through smoke. Daenerys stepped to the roof's edge and looked out across King's Landing, this wounded city that now belonged to her whether she wanted it or not. In the distance, beyond the walls, she could see the faint glow of Tywin Lannister's campfires like a scattered necklace of embers. 7 days, a fragile pause. Somewhere within the keep's ruins, Cersei Lannister sat in chains and plotted in silence. Somewhere in the city, Littlefinger's knives still waited in dark pockets, and Varys's whispers moved like rats. Somewhere on the Kingsroad, ravens would land on battlements and change men's hearts, or harden them. And somewhere far beyond all of it, the wall stood, and the cold watched. Daenerys drew her cloak tighter, not because she was cold, but because she felt the future pressing in like wind before a storm. "We'll go north," she said quietly. Jorah turned his head, studying her profile. "When?" Daenerys lifted her gaze to Drogon's towering shadow. "Soon," she said, "before the realm has time to forget what fire looks like." Melisandre's smile flickered in the torchlight. "Before the cold remembers," she murmured. Daenerys did not answer. She watched the night sky where 2 dragons had vanished and imagined their wings cutting through unseen snow. Imagined black stone and white ice and something old waking beneath it all. For the first time since the red keep burned, Daenerys felt something colder than fear settle in her chest. Not doubt, urgency.